Oh, a bunch of junk in the background there. Hello, Robert. I figured some stuff out yesterday. Spending a lot of time in the lab. I wish you guys could come to the lab. It's unfortunately this class and the way I teach this class, it's very hands-on. And we do a lot of stuff in the lab, and it's more helpful to be in the lab, but because of COVID-19, we can't do a lot of the stuff in the lab, and that's proved to be very challenging for teaching this class. Made it a lot more work for me, and I'm not complaining or anything. I'm just saying that's what it is. But I've got the all the virtual machines set up, and I apologize for being so far behind. A lot of this is on me, mostly because I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to do this remotely. I was trying to help set up that COVID-19 lab, which is more or less done. That project's done. If anybody would like to be guinea pigs, by the way, no, not for testing COVID-19 vaccines. You know, we're not going to inject anybody with COVID-19. But if anybody wants to try testing some of these new tests that the industry is working on to detect the presence of COVID-19 antibodies, let me know, because this new lab is looking for volunteers to try out different tests. And these tests are not, you know, we're not injecting you with anything. We're not taking blood. It's simply spit in this vial. You know, put this cotton swab under your tongue for 2 minutes, and then you know, put the spit from that cotton swab into a vial. It's kind of like doing a DNA test. Has anybody ever done a DNA test in here, like the 23andMe or Ancestry.com DNA? Basically spit into a little tube, send them about 1 ounce of spit, and they tell you whether or not you're related to George Washington or whatever. Nobody? That's because you're not a baby boomer like me. You're not, you guys, you'll get to an, I promise you, you guys will get to an age. They're not actually that expensive. And yeah, I've done it before. And it pretty much told me exactly what I knew, and that's because my family and my family heritage is pretty well documented, which is true for most Western Europeans. And my family is German and Swedish, and they really kept good documents when they came to this country. And yes, I am actually related to George Washington. I just happened to mention that. I am a direct descendant of George Washington's brother, who owned Mount Vernon. George Washington never had any kids of his own, or actually, let me take that back. He never had any sons, by the way. Am I going to run for president? No. Why? You have to be either insane or think that you're all that to run for president, or be the smartest person in the world. I don't know. That's a lot of work running for. It is interesting, but that, you know, being the direct descendant of the guy that owns that built Mount Vernon, all that does, it gets me free admission to Mount Vernon, but other than that, doesn't give me anything else. The most I have is white privilege, you know, being a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant man, which is, I never asked for it, and it's a big topic in the news. And it's always felt uncomfortable. I was born in Atlanta, Georgia, by the way, very at the time where there was a lot of segregation. And I've lived in Houston most of my life. I think, and I'm sorry that this is not 4397, but it's probably worth saying. We live in a very integrated society, I think, but I've lived in a lot of other places, like a lot of you probably have. And there are certain cities that they have much greater racial tensions than we do here, like Detroit, for one, Chicago, Los Angeles. It's really bad in LA. All the cultures intentionally don't intermingle. At least they didn't when I lived there. Here, it's a little bit more mixed. Anyway, I like it here. Lived here most of my life. I like it in Houston. When I go to really white parts of the world, if you know what I'm talking about, like Oklahoma, I feel uncomfortable. Isn't that funny? I'm used to the diversity. Has anybody been to Oklahoma City recently? Everybody looks like me there. It's kind of creepy. Anyway, so what I figured out was, and I'm gonna do a walkthrough. We're gonna try this 2 different ways. First of all, was anybody successful in getting the VPN working? And you probably weren't unless you tried it within the last 24 hours. If you did try it, I got it working for me, and I set up a couple of test student accounts. And so as long as you use the L2TP, it should work. Not to guarantee that it will work, but I want everybody to try it first, and I want you to email me if it works or not in order to communicate with the EI lab. It's not going to be critical because I've got some workarounds that will be okay for this class. I still got to figure out some stuff for 4477 where it's more critical that they have a Windows workstation. And I did get a Windows 10 workstation working on the VMware, the older version of VMware that we have. But because of COVID-19 and it being summer, I can't upgrade to the newer versions of the software I need. There's nobody to call and talk to, or I can't get budgeting for that. So I couldn't do it if I wanted to, but although I got the Windows 10 machine working, I could not use the duplicator to clone it a bunch of times. All the clones were messed up, like that Michael Keaton movie, Duplicity. You guys ever see that movie with Michael Keaton? It's a funny movie to watch, and where Michael Keaton clones himself because he wants to, you know, be able to do the housework and do all the things that his wife wants him to do, and he wants to go out and have a good time. And then the clone gets bored, so the clone clones himself, and then the clone clones himself. And you end up with like a 6th generation clone is essentially retarded. That's kind of like what was happening last night with these clones I was making. They were retarded versions of the Windows 10. So anyway, am I sharing the screen? Can you guys see my screen share? Pull out the chat. There it is. There it is. I'm using a different computer than I usually use because the other one blue screened earlier. Okay, so I got it to the point to where sorry. I got it to the point to where I was able to open a window on my computer here. Now I think I broke it again. So let's try this 2 different ways. I think I showed you this already, but I want to run through the VPN again. And like I said, it should work because I have every student ID and password in, and here's the student IDs and passwords you're supposed to use. For the VPN, the pre-shared key is disk 2020. The default password you're going to use is that right there. I know I told everybody I was going to set a different password for everybody, but I decided just for the summer, let's just stick with Windows 7 VMs. and let's just stick with the data that was already there. Okay. So I'm going to delete that connection. And then your user ID is, of course, your student ID. Okay, so first of all, for those of you that are Mac users, I don't know exactly how to get this to this screen, but it's similar. For Windows users, do you know how to get to this screen? Right? You're seeing right now the network connection screen. Should be as easy as clicking on the start button and typing in NETWOR, and somewhere on that menu that pops up is Network and Sharing Center. So you should be able to get to this, and there's several different ways to get to this, but that's how I know to get to it. I just start typing in NETWOR. Click on Set Up a New Connection. right here, which is what I'm going to do. It pops up this window. I keep having to drag all these windows over off of my main screen. Actually, you know what I could do? Let me do this instead. No, I'm not going to do that. I was going to share the other screen, but it's too much trouble. I want to share this screen. Connect to a workplace, aka VPN. Click next. Click use my internet connection. Next. Internet address 192.138.194.45. That's the given server. That number is actually the IP address of the firewall that protects the EI lab. It's also running the VPN software. Destination name, let's just call it EI lab VPN. Remember my credentials? Let's say not. Don't remember your credentials. Have it ask you every time. Click create. Now, if you open this window, which you can get to it by clicking here, change adapter settings, and it opens up this. You'll see that it's created a new icon, EI Lab VPN. Let's right-click that and go to Properties, and go check out the properties of that connection. And here's the couple of things that you need to change on that. There's not a lot, but there's a couple of things you want to change. Oh, darn it, I can't get to it. Bear with me one sec. Oh, there it is. Got hidden behind the chat window. So it brings up this window. Click on Options. Again, you can have it remember the credentials if you want, but I'm going to leave it out for now. Click on Security. Change that from automatic to Layer 2 Tunneling Protocol, L2TP. This would be the third thing down. And for Apple people, as long as you can get to create a VPN, this is all the same. Layer 2 tunneling protocol with IPsec. Then click on the advanced settings because we need to add that pre-shared key. It's designed to use a public certificate. I'm going to click that. We're going to type in this, which I just gave you, disk 2020. Okay. DISC 2020. Click OK. Probably don't need to do anything else at this point, so I'm going to click OK. I'm going to double click that, and that'll bring up this window. How do you want to connect? I want to connect to EI Lab VPN. Click connect. It's going to ask you for the username and password. This is where you enter your student ID. Don't enter all zeros. That's the sample one I created just for me. The password for everybody the first time is that right there. Now it's going to prompt you. If successful, it will prompt you. You'll have another window pop up almost immediately. And this may or may not work, and that's why I have to double check. It should pop up and ask you, do you want to change that password? Or it'll force you to change that password. Make your password some number of uppercase and lowercase letters, at least one number, and then a special character, like the exclamation point, or bang, or the $, or something like that. So, BMJUS3R exclamation point. Click OK. Says it's connecting. Might take a little bit. About 30 seconds or so. There might be one other thing I need to change. I'll show you in a second if this doesn't pass. Doesn't look like it's working. I click cancel. I'm going to click on advanced options because what I want to change. Come back here, click properties. I think I need to change. Oh, I know what I needed to change. Other than advanced settings. No, that should work. Option. Make sure that's under optional encryption. should have worked. Advanced options. I may have changed the password on it. On my account. This worked when I showed 4477. Okay, they're asking for it. It worked for 4477. I don't know why it's not working now. Unless there's a maximum number of connections. Has anybody else tried it? Are you trying it now? I'll bet you that's what's going on. I'll bet you there's a maximum number of connections. I entered just, thank you. You should have said, turn on your mic and say something, so I got it wrong, Rahul. I'm glad somebody's paying attention. You think I entered that wrong there? Is that what you said? Should be just 2020. I bet you were running into a maximum number of VPN connections. It wasn't clear on this router how many VPN connections I could have. Let me log into it real quick. I'll show you guys, because I also wanted to show you where I do the network address translation. If we can't get VPN working, the next best thing to use is network address translation. I forgot the password. Give me 1 second, guys. Looking at it, I'm pretty sure I changed it. Too many people were trying to get into it. There we go. Let's see if anybody was successful. It doesn't look like it. Okay. So I've got to figure out where the breakdown is on that. The connection was prevented because of a policy configured in your server. Yeah. This is helpful. This is good to know. So I'll troubleshoot that a little bit later, but the next best thing to use is the network address translation. So I have set up network address translation so that you should be able to get to the Citrix Zen desktop. In other words, you should be able to run the Citrix Zen desktop remote access software. The first thing you need to do is download the Citrix receiver. So go Google for Citrix receiver 4.11. It's an older version, but that's what we need. If you're running a Mac, Google for Citrix receiver 4.11 space Mac OS. So go download and install that. Receiver 4.11, scroll back up. Don't download that, download this right there. Download that, install that. You don't need to log in or anything. After you've installed it, it might ask you to specify some information. Just skip all that. Just install it, then close the program. Once that's installed, then you should be able to open up a Chrome window. Make sure that you've also installed this IE plugin to make your Chrome look like Internet Explorer. You don't know what that is? Just type an IE plugin, and Chrome will take you to this IE tab plugin page, and it will ask you to install it. And the only reason we need that is because the Citrix receiver version of the program I have is expecting that people are using Internet Explorer. IE tab makes Chrome look like Internet Explorer. So click on that little E at the top. Then we're going to type in, we can't type in eilab.uh.edu because that doesn't exist in the real world. We'll type in http://192.138.194.45:9080. And that's the port number that I'm forwarding to the Citrix server, which runs on just plain old port 80. I typed that in wrong. I typed in 102. Excuse me, 192. And you should get this. Once you get this, you should be able to log in with your student ID. Then that password, that VNJUS3R exclamation point, and then the domain, eilab.power.uh.edu. If you can do this, and everybody should be able to do that, it should bring this up. The moment that you click that plus sign, it will ask you, it's not going to ask me, but it's going to ask you to change your password. It's going to say you're using the default password and need to change it. So if some of you want to try this right now, you can try it. Once you change your password, then come back to this screen and click on that play button again, and it should eventually, although we were having trouble with it earlier. I did get it to work a couple of times, and then I tried again, and it seemed to stop working. But
can you send the web address in the chat possibly, so it's easier to see?
Sure, hang on. Well, I've got it in this WordPad document here. So the Citrix login. Student ID, that's the password, and that's the domain. Where you're going to is you're going to http:// oh, there it is up there, excuse me. No, I already typed it in. That's where you're going to. Use Chrome with the IE tab. Press WinG to open game bar. What the heck? That's what I'm getting. I got it to work from 2 other laptops, but I probably have the wrong wrong version. I think I probably have the wrong version of the Citrix receiver installed already on this computer. So try that. If anybody, whether you're successful or not. It looks like Robert might be successful. Do you see anything on your screen yet, Robert, that looks like Windows 7? Eventually, you should get a Windows 7 window. Yeah, you hit the play button. Hit the play button, Robert.
Can you show the login again? Sorry, I didn't get it.
This thing here? Is that what
Yeah.
you're referring to?
Yeah, that's what I need. Thank you.
Now, if you can't get this working, that's okay too. We don't have to have these. This is, like I said, this is more critical for 4477. What's critical for you guys is that you have access to a Proxmox server, which, like I said in the past, I usually have the students set it up, but I set them all up last night. And I set them up so that we should be able to access them through, I need to set, here's what I need to do. I need to set up a NAT translation for them as well. So I'm going to show you what I'm going to do here. Can I scroll up on this window here? Lost my mouse, there it is. I'm going to scroll up, hope that was okay. I have 7 servers running in there. And I have assigned everybody to a server. I need to, and I apologize for this, I need to update the Grade Center. I'm going to upload a modified version of the Grade Center, so you will have a column that says Proxmox VM or Proxmox server, Proxmox team that you're on, team 1 through 8, basically. Nobody's on team 1, I'm on team 1, so everybody's going to be on team 2 through 8. So in the lab, team 2 is using a server called Proxmox 2. Its IP address, and you don't have to memorize this, I'm just putting this down for now, is 192.168.10.200. 3 is Proxmox 3. It's at 192.168.20.100. And these are all separated in different cabinets. So 1 and 2 are in one cabinet by themselves. 3 and 4 are on a separate LAN, 20.200. And 5 and 6 are at 192.168.30.100. and 192.168.30.200. So normally the way you access these, so I'll show you this first, how normally if we were in the lab, if we were on our virtual machines, how we would access them. So I'm going to access one of my machines in the lab. It's sitting on the network there. And I've already logged into it, so I'm going to log out. Can you guys read that, or do I need to blow that up? That's a little small, right? Is that more readable? Can you read the URL? Can you read the top line? Let me see. Let me do this instead. Let me unscale it. There we go. That's better. So open up a browser. This is what you normally do, and you would go to the IP address. First of all, we're going to use HTTPS. 192. If I was on team 2, for example, 192.168, and these numbers will be in. You'll be able to find them in Blackboard in your Grade Center. It's actually will be a column in your Grade Center. 192.168.10.200:8006. The :8006, that's the standard port number that Proxmox runs on. Normally, most web servers run on port 80. Proxmox runs on port 8006. So after you install Proxmox, something like this appears on the screen. It says, you're done here installing on the server. Go open up a web browser and go to HTTP, whatever the IP was that you assigned it. It's going to give you this warning. Your connection is not private. The only reason you get that warning is because this is not a public server, so I've not bothered to apply for certificate authority, CA certificates, they're called. In other words, it doesn't have a real domain name. So just click Advanced. And you can use Chrome on these. You don't have to use the IE tab. This is just straight up Chrome. The username is going to be root, and the password, and this is only for the first few days that we're using it. I'm going to want everybody to add their own username, but the password is MIS4397, and I'll go type this in those notes. So users root password for all of them is MIS4397. PROXMOX $. That's the generic admin user root and password. Leave realm as it is, leave language as it is, click log in. You're going to be given this warning here. Warning, you do not have a valid subscription. Are you okay with this? That's just their little annoyance to say, hey, you should go subscribe. Because again, this is how these companies make their money. They request you subscribe to their services so that you get periodic free downloads and upgrades and a more commercial version. This is what your dashboard looks like the first time you log into Proxmox. I'm logged into all of them here. But this is what your dashboard is going to look like. You'll see data center. You'll see the name of the server here. If there was more than one server in this cluster, we haven't clustered anything together yet, you would see Proxmox 2, 3, 4, 5. You would see several of them in this list. You're only going to see one, again, the first few days that we're using these until we cluster them together. And again, I apologize. We should have had this done already by last week. So I'm taking this into consideration. If you notice, while we're in Data Center, you've got a menu here of different things you can do. We click on Summary, and it tells us just a little bit of information about this particular virtual environment cluster, like how many virtual machines there are, how many containers there are. There's none set up yet, none running. How much CPU is being used, how much memory is being used. There's 32 gigs of RAM in this computer. So, you know, there's nothing going on yet on this computer. There's the IP address. There's no cluster information yet. Options. None of this stuff you're probably going to change. Storage, let me show you that. Storage refers to where we can store information. Every virtual environment has different storages and possibly different storage types. The first storage here is set up called local storage. You don't want to use that typically. That's just your standard directory storage that's intended for Proxmox to use. Now you might want and might need to use that storage if you needed to download, or I should say upload, ISO files or files to make other virtual machines out of. So I'm going to go ahead and show you that now, because one of the first things I want you guys to do is, once you successfully get connected to your Proxmox that you're supposed to get connected to, and I'll show you in a minute what I'm going to do so you can do it without having to use the VPN, without having to use the Citrix Zen desktop network address translation. We'll do it in an even easier way. You've got local and local ZFS. Let me change the view here. I'm going to go over here, click on Proxmox 2, and it changes my view. I can actually see what's in local storage. So I click over here. Here's the summary of this storage called local. It says there are, its usage is only 1 gig of 450 gigs. So got lots of space, not even that much. So got lots of space. Content, if I click on content, there won't be anything yet. Okay, this is where you guys can potentially upload an ISO file. Let's say you wanted to make a virtual machine, like a virtual Windows machine, for example, or a virtual Linux machine you will go Google for or search the internet for an appropriate ISO file. So I'll click on select file. Let's see if I have it in my downloads. Okay, here we go. Here's Windows 10. That's going to take a while to upload. Let's just start it. Actually, let's upload a smaller one. Here's CentOS 7. That one's almost a gig. It's going to take a while to upload that. So I'll go ahead and start that upload. Once that upload is done, you can use that ISO file to create virtual machines. Those are standalone machines. Let me go ahead and let that finish since it's going pretty quickly from my home network here. Another thing that you might store on the local storage area or backups, or maybe something called templates. I'll show you templates in just a minute. Now, keep in mind, for those of you on Team 2, and only the graduate students are on Team 2. Oh, wait a minute, I don't have any graduate students in this class. Do I? None of you are graduate students in this class, I don't think. So I will assign a random number of you to Team 2. Once you're assigned, you log into this machine and you decide, hey, I want to create a CentOS 7 virtual machine to start playing around with. You don't have to upload an ISO because I already did it for you. You all will have access to this. It's there already. I'm going to click on templates. Now, I had mentioned before, you have virtual machines and you have containers. A container is a smaller, lighter weight virtual machine that's based on the underlying operating system. So you can create a Linux virtual machine because the underlying OS is Linux, and it's even easier to create. I don't have to upload anything, or actually I do have to upload anything. Here's a whole bunch of templates in a list that are available. So the way I got to this is I logged in, I expanded this list. By the way, it is minimized. Clicked on local, clicked on template, and it populates that list. These aren't available yet. This is just a list of all the possible templates that are available in the library for you to choose from. So let's say you decide, well, I want to experiment around with a different flavor of Linux, like Ubuntu. Let's try Ubuntu 18, which is a relatively new version of Ubuntu. There's actually an Ubuntu 20. Also, let's try 18 first. And so you can click that. And I'm actually not seeing the whole window. I have to change this real quick so I can see the whole window. There, download. So what that's doing is that's actually downloading it directly to the server. Now, when you're looking for ISOs, it's kind of a two-step process. You're going to have to find the ISO on the internet, download it to your Windows or your Mac first, then upload it through the Proxmox interface to get it uploaded. So now, if I log into Proxmox 2, look at local, I've got both an ISO image to do something with and one container image. If you want to decide, well, I don't want to do Ubuntu 18, or maybe I want to do Ubuntu 18 and Ubuntu 20, and compare the two. Feel free to create two VMs of the same, on the same server, because you can. I encourage everybody to create as many VMs as they want. At some point, the servers will bog down and say, "Oh, I've got too many VMs running." But if you're creating just containers, in fact, I recommend you start out with a container. Containers are simpler. Okay. Oh, we got a little. I need to fix something later on, but so anyway, now I've got 2 distributions. These are distributions. These aren't virtual machines. These are just distributions that I can use to create virtual machines. They're templates I can use to create virtual machines. So you can't do anything until you've got at least one ISO or at least one container downloaded to begin creating a virtual machine. Excuse me. So let me show you how to create a virtual machine. I'm going to click on Proxmox here, the node. Oh, excuse me, I'm so sorry. I'm going to create a container. Just like I said, that was simpler. Create CT. It's right up here at the top, the blue button. Can you guys see this okay? I'm not going to blow the screen back up right now. Create CT. It's going to ask me some questions. Node, which node do you want to put it on? Well, I've only got one node in this cluster. If once we cluster these machines together, you may see Proxmox 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Choose one. Container ID, it defaults to the number 100. I don't want you to use that numbering scheme. I mean, you can use that numbering scheme, but I want you to use a numbering scheme that is pertinent to your server. So, or I'm on Proxmox 2 right now. So let's start all the containers and all the VMs that are on Proxmox 2 with the number 2. Let's start any containers and any VMs that are on Proxmox 3 with the number 3, and so on and so forth. And the reason that's important is because in a few days when we cluster these machines together, if there's a container number 100 on Proxmox 2 and also a container number 100 on Proxmox 3, guess what happens? One of those containers gets stepped on and goes away. So make sure when you're creating these that you change that number. So I'm just going to arbitrarily choose 201 for the first container. Host name. I need to give this machine a valid networking name, all lowercase, please. Don't put any special characters. I'm going to call this one, what did I decide? I was going to create a CentOS 7. So I'm just going to call it lowercase Jake dash CentOS 7. Now I'm not going to put in the domain name. This is not a fully qualified domain name, FQDN. As I mentioned the other day, not yesterday. I apologize for class yesterday. I need to record something to upload there. Just the host name. Password. Now, in the case of a container, you set the password outside of the OS. If it was a VM, you put the password inside. I'm going to make the password, and I recommend that you do this for the first couple that you create. Let's use the same password that we used for the root login. Now, will other people be able to log into your container? Yes, but that's okay for the first couple of days because I want everybody to cooperate and help each other. So you can say, hey, Robert, can you log into my container? I don't think I'm doing it right. And you already know the password. Once you get the ball rolling, then you can change it. So I'm going to make it MIS 4397 PROXMOX. No, and then confirm it. You won't be able to go to the next screen unless you've done everything right. Obviously, they don't match. Obviously, I have fat fingers. Storage. This is asking you where the template is. There it is right there, Ubuntu. Disk size. Let's just take the defaults, okay? Now, the other storage, local ZFS. That is an area where the images or the disk files for the containers and the VMs are designated to live. It's actually the same storage space in this case. On this server, it's the same physical storage space, but it's in a special compressed format so that anything that gets created in this ZFS pool gets compressed, takes up less space, and it is an image file. It's one gigantic file rather than a bunch of little discrete files. It's more efficient. Cores, let's leave it at 1. Memory, let's bump it up to 1024, which is 1 gig. Networking, let's leave all of that the same, except let's change this to DHCP. let's not assign any static addresses for your first VM. Let's just turn on DHCP. Then it'll get an address from the server, I promise. With next. DNS domain, you could put in you could put in information if you wanted to, but it doesn't need it because we're using DHCP. But I'm going to go ahead and put in .uh.edu and servers. I'm going to use 192.168.1. Excuse me, 192.168.1. And then you can add multiple if you want. You separate them with a comma. Next. Finish. So everybody should be able to create, as soon as you get access, as soon as you know what server you're on, everybody should be able to create their first container and then start playing with it. So it's really quick to create those. Now, how do you access the container? First of all, you got to turn it on. So here it is here. I'm going to click it one time. I'm going to right click. I'm going to click start. Start it up. It's going to tell me down here in the log window whether it started okay or not. It says okay, it started okay. Then I'm going to come back here again. I'm going to click it one time. I'm going to come over here to where it says console, and I'm going to go down to Xterm. I'm going to use the Xterm console. There's 3 different ways in Proxmox to view a container. Xterm is the best way. So use Xterm. It has copy and paste capabilities. It's going to ask you for a login. What do you log in as? Root. And that's because there's no users yet. You're going to add users, but there aren't any yet. Password in my S4397 ROXMOX $. And there you are. Now you can resize that window if you want. That's where you're going to start experimenting with Linux. Okay, some important things regarding containers. Make sure that you're using just DHCP the first time. If you want to know what your IP address is, it depends on the OS, but typically you can type in a command in Linux like IP space address. And it'll tell you what your internet address is. Ignore anything that has anything to do with local. Just ignore this whole chunk. Go down to this one. There's your internet address right there, 192.168.10.15. And the only reason that's working is because I have DHCP running on the local area network. Try pinging something, ping. 8.8.8.8, Google's public DNS. Ooh, I can ping. So I know I've got networking. Try using an installer like apt-get install MC. Excuse me, app, just app installers. There's a program called MC. I'm going to install it. Mouseless Commander. There's a program called what's that editor that I like to use? Not VI. VI editor is terrible. Oh, Nano. I usually download the Nano editor. Some important notes here. So that's running in the background. It's showing up right here. So if you're using Chrome, you'll notice you've got 2 Chrome windows open. One of them is right here. This thing, and then this is my Chrome window to my dashboard, Proxmox. If I click on that container one time, it brings me up to this screen. I want everybody to make sure that you are making use of this box, this notes box. If you want to add a note, just double click on it. Here's what I want everybody to do. When you first create a container, first note, even before you turn it on, put in the date and your initials. Oh, excuse me, CentOS. Put in some note regarding that virtual machine or that container so that I know, 1, who it belongs to, and 2, why you created it, 3, is it important? You know, what are you doing with it? This also shows me that you're working. Come down here to options. You can look at these other things. Look at each one of them if you want, just to see what they are. But on options, you probably want to change this to start at boot equals yes. The reason we change that is so that if your Proxmox server is rebooted, and it will be occasionally rebooted, because we do need to upgrade the OS of Proxmox. So if you're not around and somebody else on your team decides to upgrade the Proxmox, they see, oh, there's a new version out, I'm going to upgrade it, and they reboot the Proxmox server, your container will not automatically start unless you have that flag there set to yes, or that box checked, okay? So that's semi-important. You can change that TTY count, of that number of terminals count, to something bigger if you need more than 2 console screens into it, which I don't think you do, so just leave that alone. You can check the task history. If you think somebody's been messing around with your container, you can click on task history, and it will tell you when that machine was turned off, when it was turned on, when it got logged into by so-and-so. Backup, that's important. After you've made some changes to your container, you might want to do a backup. I would recommend everybody get in the habit of taking backups. Or back them up with local storage, that's fine. Leave that on Z standard. Send an email. Now, if you know that your VM's really big, which none of these are, but you have a really big VM, it's going to take maybe an hour to back up, stick an email address in there, and it will email you when the backup's done. So while you're at Starbucks or Subway or wherever you're at around the park, you'll get an email. Hey, your backup's done. Now, you can be using the virtual machine while it's making a backup. We don't recommend that you do that. Snapshot, almost like backup. And I think I showed some of you this already. Didn't I show this already, where I created a Windows machine, or I created a VM and did something irrevocable, like erase the root directory? I think I showed you this already. So I'm not going to go through all of this, but I'm just showing you what I would like you guys to do. Now, how do we access this machine when we're not in the EI lab? Well, if we can't get VPN working, and we can't get the network address translation working to remote view a virtual workstation, why don't we try creating NAT forwards for the Proxmox servers themselves? So that's what I'm going to try right now. I'm going to try it with you on the computer here. So I've got one public IP address that I can use. Actually, I've got more than one, but I use them for other stuff. 192.138.194.45. That's my public IP. Okay. So if I decided I want to create a forwarding rule, so if anybody went to that IP address, :8006, send them to some internal IP address. But I've got 8 servers. How do I deal with 8 servers? I need to assign some different port numbers to the different servers. So here's what I'm going to do. Rather than using port 8006, I'm going to say, let's use different port numbers, like port 9002 for server 2, port 9003 for server 3, port 9004 for server 4. And then when you're going to go surf to it, you want to, let's say you're on team 4. Oh, I need to go to team 4. So you're going to open up your browser and go to https://192.138.194.45. In other words, nothing to do with the IP address of your server up here. That's internal, but you're going to stick :9004, :9004 after it. Stick that into Google, and that will bring up that login as soon as. It's not going to work yet. First of all, you don't know what team you're on. And secondly, it's not going to work because I need to enter the forward. So let's see if I can do that while I've got you on the computer with me in the Sonic wall. I'll teach you guys a little bit. What do I need to do? blow this up a little bit more. Is it Alt plus or Shift plus? I can't remember. It's Control plus. Okay. So here's the Sonic Wall gateway / firewall thing that I'm using when it comes over here to manage. And I don't do this every day. I'm not on Sonic Wall, so yeah, I'm going to go a little slow. Network. I'm looking for NAT. Let me find NAT. Might be under rules. Here it is, NAT policies. Let's see what NAT, let's just take one that I know I already had in there and duplicate it basically. So here's the NAT policy that I set up for the Zen server that apparently is not working properly, but let's take a look at it. So I named this policy, and you guys can do this on your local firewalls as well, most of them. It's called, they usually call it virtual server, or it might be called NAT port forwarding. It's usually called virtual server. Name, what do I want to name this policy? I'm going to just call it Zen server in this case. Original source, that is what IP address or where is it coming from? In this special case, it's coming from everywhere. I want to allow traffic coming from anywhere in the world going to the destination of whatever's underneath that. That happens to be the IP address 192.138.194.45. Translated into this internal IP address, which again, I've already named all of these. Zen server internal. Original service was 9080 translated to HTTP, so excellent. All right, so let me set this one aside. I'm going to build a new one here. Let's see if I can keep this one on the screen at the same time. So I'm just using this one as my template. It looks like it got rid of it. That's okay. I'll just try to remember. So name, let's just say Proxmox 2. Original source, anywhere in the world. Translated source. Where am I going to? It's the WAN IP, the WAN interface IP. That's set as 192.138.194.45. Original destination. Oh, excuse me, translated source. I want to leave that as any two. Excuse me, original. Destination, that's what I want to change. Pardon me. Change this to, I don't think I have any of the Proxmox servers set up yet. So I'm going to create a new object here, Proxmox 2. Now you guys don't have to do this, I'll do all this for you, but I'm just showing you guys this because it's interesting stuff. It's on the LAN. Its IP address is 192.168.10.200. Pretty sure it's on the LAN, yeah. Oops, that's weird. It went away. Original service. Now here's where I need to come up with those port numbers, which I don't think I've added port number 9000 in here. So create a new service. I'm going to create a new service and call it, I'm just going to call it port 9002. So I'm going to call it protocol. It's TCP. Port range is 9002 to 9002. That's what you're typing in the browser. Translated service, what do we need to translate it into? We need to translate it into that port 8006 internally. Let's see if I have it set up already. Probably not. So again, I'm going to add a new service. It's also TCP. Inbound interface is, I think, any will work. And element also add. I might need to change that. I need to compare that other one. Oops. The interface is the actual Ethernet ports. I've got lots of Ethernet ports on that device, so it's not just WAN and LAN. They're all X1, X2, X3. Looks like it's all X1. I think that's right. I'm not positive. Let me leave it on that and see if that works as that. Okay, let's see if that works. I may need to change one other thing, but let's see if that works at this point. Colon 9002. I think I need to do one additional thing. Anyway, let me finish those up. I need to go look at a Sonic Wall. I don't use Sonic Wall all the time. I use it for Sophos. Sonic Wall is what happened to be in the lab when I got there. So I'm pretty sure I need to add that port forwarding somewhere else. But hopefully you see what the general concept is and what I'm trying to do. Let me change that to X1. See if that works real quick. And if not, I don't want to keep you guys waiting. So. Okay, I'm sure there's something else that I need to do that I'm not doing to make that work. So, but it's nothing else that you guys need to do. Here's another thing that I came across, by the way, when I was playing around, looking on the internet, trying to find alternative ways for you guys to have access to Linux that you can play with. Like if you were having issues with getting VirtualBox running. I Googled for online Linux terminal. And I came up with a few different links, and I think this one's kind of cool. Go click on that, LXD. It's a pre-built virtual container for you to play with that logs you in. So you might want to experiment with that until you get an email saying, hey, I've got all of the virtual, the NAT translation set up, and here's how to access your Proxmox. So your homework for right now is go to this LXD container link and start up a virtual terminal and start experimenting with some of those commands. Which commands you say? Go back to the content for the class. Log in again real quick here. And I will also email you a couple of Linux tutorials to play with. I'm scrolling off the screen. You don't see the whole screen, excuse me. Oh, I thought I had a tutorial on the screen here. Go by this for right now. I'll send you some official tutorials to check out, but here's some commands I want you to get familiar with. So for right now, till you get that email, and I'm going to do this in the next few minutes, guys, okay? Go to that LXD. Just go Google for online Linux. What did I say? What did I type in? I forgot now. Yeah. Need to go back to it. Where was it?
I think it was Linux Virtual Terminal.
Online Linux Terminal. That's what I typed. Online Linux Terminal. Agree. And there's several of them. I just grabbed that LXD one. And then type in these commands while you're Googling for what the syntax of them is. So there's CD. And here's a nice thing about most Linuxes. And I don't know if this is true for LXD. If you don't know how to do something, like if you don't know what the CD command is, you see CD. What the heck is that? What's the CD command do? Windows on it. Nah, I'm lost. I can't see the top part of my screen on this screen here. Hang on one second. Let me do this. To get back to where I was. There it is. Okay, so I Google for online Linux terminal. I clicked on this one, LXD, try it online, Linux containers. It's giving me a public IP. Oh, that's interesting. Oh no, that's my IP. This is the demo environment. Works for 30 minutes and then I guess it kicks you out. Starting the container. Okay, so I want to know how to use CD. So you can type in CD, and it's not going to do anything, or it might give you an error. Type in man space CD. It may or may not. I was hoping that it would give you manual information. Most Linux systems will give you man pages. Can't install anything. So, aside from that, go Google for Linux, and then the name of the command, syntax. Linux CD syntax. And you'll find lots of information on the syntax for those different commands. Now, I'll put together, and I've got in my notes, I've got notes to all of this, but the reason I'm showing you guys this way is because I'm trying to teach you how to Google for things better. And there's also some good sites to use and some not so good sites to use. This is one of the better sites. DigitalOcean is good. Linux.org is good. LinuxEyes.com, they're good too. So experiment around with each one of those commands to get used to what those commands do and what they are. While you're giving me a few minutes to update the content so you know what team you're on, and fix these network address translations. So all you have to do is click on the URL for your team, and I'll put that on Blackboard and in the email. So you don't have to type it in. You just have to click on this URL, and it'll take you to the Proxmox login page. And then that way you can just make it a shortcut on your desktop of your laptop or whatever computer you're using. Okay? So give me about 30 minutes to finish that stuff up. Any questions for right now? Don't see any questions being typed in. Don't hear anybody saying anything. So start experimenting around with that. Go ahead and try, if you haven't tried already, VPNing in, and then send me an email about what kind of errors you were getting, like this error that Robert stated. And I will try to work on that, figuring out why that's not working after I get the network address translation working. So at the very least, everybody can access a Proxmox server, and so that you can access your Proxmox server. So once you can access your Proxmox server by this evening, hopefully within the next 30 minutes, I want you to set up a container. And if you want me to make it easier, I will go ahead on each Proxmox and I will download at least one template of something, Ubuntu or CentOS or Debian, so that you don't have to decide which one to choose. I'll download one for you so that you can create a template or excuse me, create a container of your own to start playing with. Okay? No questions? All right then. Give me just a little while. I'm gonna stop. Actually, what I'm gonna do is I'll stop recording now. I'll go ahead and keep the Zoom meeting running if you guys want to watch what I'm doing, but I'll stop the recording and then get this uploaded a little bit later. But I want to solve this so you guys can get working. Stop recording. I can't remember that.